It is no secret that keeping fish tanks can be expensive, especially when you have hundreds of them like I do. But that's probably why YouTube is flooded with clickbait videos about 7 ways to save money. And most of the ways are go to swap meets, go to Facebook Marketplace, and buy rocks at Home Depot. That is not this video at all. In fact, this video is way less sexy. It's actually addressing the actual problem and is not a clickbait at all. The real problem that I think truly exists is that consumers buy based off of bang for your buck. If that sounds like you, this video is meant for you, and I think it will save you a ton of money. Howdy everybody, I'm Adam with Old School Aquatics, and welcome back if you're tuning into the How to Build a Fishroom series. This is episode 5 on procurement. Now, I am thinking through it like a business, not because you're a business, but because businesses figured out that there's more to it than bang for your buck. Let's jump into what are the different variables. Variable number 1 is lead times. Typically, lead time is from the time when you purchase something to the time when you get it in your hand. Now, that lead time matters, and if you've ever done late Christmas shopping, on Amazon especially, you know that getting things on time is incredibly important. And when they're late, it's a huge problem, especially when you get to the scale of the whole business. However, that's not actually the lead time I mean to talk about. The lead time that matters more is understanding the time at which you're looking to buy something versus the time when you need it, and understanding that those may be very far apart, especially if you're working on a larger project. Let's say you're setting up a fish room and nothing is even installed. You're still designing it. Well, it's definitely not time to go buy lights. In my case, I made this specific mistake. That's why I'm using it as an example. Before I even installed my drain line, which is like kind of the first thing you have to do in a fish room, I had all of my lights bought and paid for and delivered. I thought I was being smart because I got them ahead of time, and I was like, well, now that I have them, I don't have to worry about them. I've already definitely budgeted because I own them, and it's perfect. What I wound up doing is moving them from room to room 20 different times. I wound up breaking a couple of them accidentally by crushing them with cinder blocks. That was painful. And actually, I wound up having a few of them that didn't even turn on, but I was outside of my return window when I figured that out. And so my tip to you guys on lead times is do not buy stuff way in advance. You can be on top of the ball. Don't back yourself into a corner here, but if you have a long time, a lot of times it's better to not buy the thing than it is to buy it. Additionally, one other thought here, and this may not pertain to lighting so much as it pertains to other things, but some equipment is much better to find on the secondhand market. That is your Facebook Marketplace, your OfferUp, or whatever. And finding it on those sources can take a lot of time. It's not often the specific 7-stage RODI unit comes up for sale in my local area. However, it did. And what I knew to do is I knew to wait. I didn't need RODI for 6 months. So I didn't just go out and buy the whole thing brand new. What I did was I waited. And I looked on Facebook and I didn't find it. And then a month later I looked again and didn't find it. After like 3 months, randomly somebody put one up for sale. I snatched it for half the price it would have been retail. The thing works great. I actually wound up buying another whole unit because I wanted it to be redundant, but it's just something to keep in mind that it's pretty helpful to monitor the lead times because you can take advantage of either secondhand markets or just not storing stuff on hand. Brings me to variable number 2, and I actually just mentioned it a second ago, and that is return convenience. It's hard to put a dollar amount on how much it's worth to be able to return something. However, I will tell you, it is invaluable. It is very nice to know that I have bought stuff at Home Depot, it's sitting on a shelf in its original packaging, I've never used it, it's not going bad, it has no expiration date, and I feel very confident I could walk into my local Home Depot, I could talk to them and tell them, hey, you know, a month ago I bought this thing, I don't really need it, can you guys take it back, here's the original card it was bought on, you know, I keep my receipts, but even if you don't, they're really willing to help you. That's not the same, especially online. So monitor wherever you're buying it from and take into account that if you're buying it from some website that has no return policy, you might just wind up a creek because it's very common you'll buy things and find a better solution later. That's just a part of this whole fun process. And when that happens, it's very nice to get your money back and not have this big sunk cost fallacy weighing over your shoulders. Variable number 3. Product life cycle. This sounds very intuitive, right? If a product lasts 6 months or a product lasts a year, you kind of factor that into what the quality of the product is. The problem is that as humans, we typically do not do this. When you are faced with a marketplace like Amazon, where you're going to see all the prices in front of you, it takes a really weird psychology to pick something that costs more. In the moment, your brain almost always defaults to cheaper is better. It's just human psychology. Amazon knows it, all retailers know it, and they exploit it. And the problem is that there may be a higher quality product that will last way longer. It'll actually be cheaper in the long run. Let me give you an example. This is a fictional example, but I think it does matter. Let's say I buy a scrubber for my fish tanks. Let's say the scrubber is $1. Okay, well, I might need to go through it every week. It's a disposable, cheap little sponge scrubber. Okay, every year that means I'm spending $52 just on scrubbing algae from the front of my glass. Who knows? There may be a better product, a nicer, who knows what the product is, for $25. It's a kick-ass scrub brush. Who knows what it looks like? Maybe you can put it in the washing machine and clean it. I'm making stuff up here. But for $25, you could find a product that would be way better than the $1 product. It'll last you all year, and so you've actually saved money, and the whole time you owned a better product. That philosophy translates all over the place in the aquarium world. Specifically, a good example of that lifetime cost is in filtration. That's why I opt for brand name sponge filters, because I know the lifetime on a brand name sponge filter is going to be much better than what I can't really trust off of eBay in bulk. Now, I know that from experience, but whatever you're looking at, contemplate, is there a higher quality solution that'll last longer? And then check the pricing and see if it really makes sense to go with the cheaper solution. Variable number 4 is minimum order quantity. I don't want to spend too much time on this one. However, it's very important to remember that usually as volume scales, pricing should decrease. If you're buying at a very large scale, it's very possible you could get an extreme discount by finding a different supplier. Even if you're used to buying something at Walmart or Amazon or Target or whatever, wherever it is, even Petco, PetSmart, whatever, if you're used to buying, 1 or 2 of something, but all of a sudden, because you have a fish room, now you need 100 of something, it is worth exploring other options. For me, that meant I'm a business, so I found wholesalers and I buy things at wholesale price. Maybe you're not a business, but if you go to your local fish store and say, hey, listen, I need to buy 100 sponge filters.
Business. Numbers.
Maybe you can give them a deal to say, I'll just give you $100 on your next wholesale order. Just buy me 100. I'll buy them at cost, and I'll just give you a $100 bill for your time. Cool fish store owners might do that. Maybe not. I had really good relationships because I was breeding fish for them at the time, so do that however you'd like. But just remember, minimum order quantities are worth money. And when you buy on Amazon, you are paying a premium for buying only a couple of something. Variable number 5 is time spent looking for alternative products. What that means is if you know that you can buy a bunch of stuff on Amazon and it generally has what you need, the cost of finding somewhere else to buy it is almost worth more than the product is in some cases. For example, I needed to buy a bunch of electrical outlets, extension cords, just general electric equipment to run a fish room. Well, I could go to Home Depot, but those margins are pretty high and all that stuff's pretty expensive. So I knew I was going to look online because I'm going to try to find a bunch of it. I'm not ordering in high enough quantity to go to a wholesaler though. But I looked on Amazon and I didn't even realize that there were a lot of other options to go buy all of this stuff at. There's actually American manufacturers that just make specific extension cords, and they're probably higher quality. But to be honest with you, it wasn't worth my time to go find all of who makes the best extension cord, who makes the best, multiple plug outlet, who makes the best surge protector. I don't have the time for it. So factor that in, is use the vendors that you already know and that you already trust, especially if they have convenient shipping times, minimum order quantities, as well as return policy, to be honest with you. And sometimes that is why I will use Amazon. Variable number 6, the cost of labor. Now, there are multiple different forms of this. There is labor to test and validate, there is labor to maintain something long-term, and there is installation or manufacturing assembly labor as well. The good example here are these bulkheads. Now, you can buy them online for like $9 a piece, or you can buy all of the different pieces just randomly assorted for like $3 or $4. For me, I was willing to go through the process of putting each one together, assuming the cost of the risk of it failing, and spending all of that time to do it, because for me, it was worth it. For you, it might not be. The point of this video is not to tell you specifically do this or specifically do that. It's to give you a framework to think behind and to just consider these specific variables. So when you're purchasing something, think about how much time it's going to take you to actually install, maintain, maybe even just validate. And all of that is consideration into the actual cost of something. The seventh and final variable is the cost of failure. For this specific one, I want to show you a very specific part of the bulkhead. That is the PEX transition at the back of the bulkhead. You see, I wound up opting for a very expensive alternative. Lots of other people straight up zip tie any random irrigation hose they want to the back of their stuff. I didn't do that. I opted for using PEX fittings, PEX connectors, the whole works, which is very expensive comparatively to zip ties. The reason I did this is that the cost of failure is immense. You can see my top row has the bulkheads up here. So if I needed to play with them, I pretty easily could. However, all these tanks and the ones on the bottom, the bulkhead is in the back. And so if that bulkhead is dripping or leaking, it is a pain. So to me, the cost of failure was worth stepping up the cost of how much I was willing to spend on doing it. That is a perfect segue into consideration number 1, which is allocate your budget based off of your goal. Now, in an earlier episode, we talked about the scope and what it means to create a goal. To remind you, my goal is to breed Neocaridina shrimp and guppies here in America. Very high quality ones at that. And in order to accomplish that goal, what that means to me is that lighting and substrate do not really matter almost at all. Just to be honest with you. You do not need expensive lighting or expensive substrate to breed guppies or shrimp by any means. So for me, although I like the look of plants and I like the look of nice lighting and everybody likes nice substrate, it's just not a need. And so for me, I had to reduce the budget in that area. What that also means is expand the budget in critical areas. I spent a ton of money on heating and cooling and ventilation for both rooms. And it's a pretty cool system. I'm excited to show you that in a later video. But that system cost so much, and I think it was worth it, because it protects my investment of the whole house, obviously, but it protects the investment of all of the animals living in it. My rooms are obviously heated and cooled together, not just down in the sump. So for me, it was a big cost on a critical system, therefore it was worth it. And so in order to afford big costs like that, you need to save on more aesthetic choices. Consideration number 2, fairly obvious, but buy extra when it is possible. If you are buying bulkheads, let's say, so we're talking about these again up here, buy extras. You don't know if you're going to get some that don't fit. You don't know if you're going to get some that are cross-threaded, broken, damaged in shipping, or maybe they work just fine and then you screw them up 3 years later. Having extra things on hand helps maintainability a ton. It also helps repairability, obviously, if something goes, catastrophically wrong. Additionally, it just eases manufacturing when you have extra components on hand, and it's almost always easy to buy extras. Like, I had to buy, hundreds of tanks. I think I bought over 100 20-gallon long fish tanks. I didn't get down to how many I needed specifically. I just filled the room. I think I had like 10% extra. I probably have like a handful of extra tanks sitting over there painted and drilled. It's fine. It doesn't really matter to have a couple $100s of extra things here or there. You need to manage it. Don't go way out of whack, because I wouldn't have anywhere to store 50 extra tanks. But having a couple of extra things on hand is a good idea, and you can do this across everything. Have extra sponge filters. Keep extra airline. Every tubing that you use in this project, you should have extra. If you use PVC, you should keep glue that is working and the PVC on hand, as well as some fittings. Having some flexibility is worth a ton of money. Even if it costs something up front, bake that into your budget. It's always worth it. I'm really speaking to myself here. I am usually the type of person that is looking to make it as exact as possible. It's always nice to have extra of something when you're done. You never know when you're going to need it in the future. Consideration number 3 is standardize everything. This kind of goes along with the last consideration, but I'll give you an example. All of these tubings are the same tubing. And you might be like, well, that's obvious. It's the same thing a million times. You'd be right in this room, but in the other room, I have all sorts of different tank sizes. I have a 2-gallon tank I'm looking at. I have a 125-gallon in the other room. These are all a bunch of 20 gallons. They all use the same bulkhead, the same interior fittings, the same exterior fittings, and the same tubing. The reason they all use the same is standardization. It saves costs. It makes things easier. I'm an engineer. I love standardization, I'll just be honest, but it is totally worth it, and it does matter for purchasing. Getting fancy with how you do things at scale is a great way to blow costs out of the water. Even if it's not the cheapest solution, the silicone is quite expensive. It would have been cheaper for me to use that rigid PEX stuff, that blue PEX B, but I opted for something that is, I mean, it's literally flexible. I like that it's the same everywhere and that it's super flexible for me to use it in both rooms. It works for everything. Just buy one thing, and then, back to the last consideration, when I need to buy extra, I just have one little bit of extra silicone on hand, and it can work anywhere in my room, which is very nice. Consideration number 4, just to say it out loud, sometimes buying in bulk is the wrong choice. It feels good, maybe you get a good discount, but it is sometimes very dumb, especially if you don't have a plan to actually use it in the very near future. I'm very guilty of this. I do this all the time. I get a really good deal on something, especially if it's on Facebook Marketplace or something where I can negotiate, and I'm like, I could probably hold on to, like, I don't know, 1,000 pounds of filter media. It's just kind of dumb. Just saying it as it is. Sometimes it's worth it, sometimes it's not, but I want to make the consideration that buying in bulk is not always the best solution unless you're ready to use it immediately and you know exactly what you want. The 5th and last consideration is probably the most important here, and this is the one that is a little bit less intuitive. This is what businesses do very well, and it's actually called cost-based design, which is a lot of fancy business useless wording to say that your price of what you pay for something will wind up impacting design. Usually, you set your requirements, you do your design, and you buy what you need from your design. But in this new framework, you still need requirements, you still need to design it, but then when you go to look at how much stuff costs, that may change your design. Now, if you're good at designing, you'll do this in real time. You'll look up how much things cost and design to it. The very good example of that in this room is actually 2x4s. Now, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but over here, we have 2 pillars of cinder blocks. The reason we did that is that the pieces of wood ended. I have 8 feet of 2x4 and another 8-foot 2x4. I actually had to cut that one down a little bit, but the actual pieces of 2x4 were 8-foot lengths. Now, I only think I needed like 15 feet total. So why didn't I just buy 15 or 16-foot 2x4s? The reason why is the 8-foot 2x4s are way, way cheaper than half of the 16-footers. I want to say it's something like 20% of the cost, or at least when I was doing it. And so for me, it made sense to just buy a ton of 8-footers and use them. The additional cost was just a couple of extra cinder blocks, and those things are just a couple dollars a piece. So for me, it was a lot easier just buy a bunch of 8-footers and base everything around 8 feet. If you're doing a different rack, obviously that information doesn't apply, but the principle and the consideration for how you purchase things absolutely does. Design something, check the pricing, redesign it, change the pricing. Find a good combination of meeting requirements for a good price. Now, what suppliers I used for my fish room. Now, I want to get ahead of this one really quick. I'm not going to go down every specific listing or Home Depot number or exactly which product is which in this video. However, I have 20 more videos planned in this series where I'm going to build all of these systems. In those videos, I'll explain exactly how much things cost, where I bought them, like the supplier, as well as what the actual product listing was. Especially if it's Amazon, just saying I bought this specific fitting is useless. I'll show you what the product page is. I'll try to drop links when possible. Not affiliate or anything, just to help you show what I got, and I'll probably look back on it someday too. I'm not talking about every specific component. In general, though, what suppliers did I go through? What I find interesting is what suppliers I went through depended a little bit on what suppliers I didn't go with. There's an elephant in the room that I want to address, and it's not to stir up any level of controversy. If you've been in the hobby a long time, you'll know the name. The name is Gemco. If you haven't heard of them, I'll give you a very brief explanation to get you up to speed. Gemco is an American retailer of basically fish room supplies. So think filters, heaters, they probably sell lights, I don't know. They sell bulkheads and that whole shtick. And generally, it's American-made products at a more of a premium price. But you know, in all of those things I listed, I am not just looking at the cheapest quality in dollar, I'm looking for what is going to be the best price long-term. So I am a pretty ideal consumer, you would think, of Gemco. I own Big Fish Room, I can purchase American products, and I have the money to do so. It seems like it would mesh perfectly. However, there is a specific reason I will not ever use Gemco for any product. And it wasn't because they somehow wronged me. It is a principle that I am going to sit on very squarely here. I do not believe in websites that you have to call for pricing. I don't buy it. I'm 24 years old. It's not the world I grew up in. It existed back when my dad was a kid, and maybe back when we got letters in the mail where you'd send a check to Sears and that's how you ordered online. That's just not how I do things. I don't want a sales pitch. I don't want to call somebody to get upsold a bunch of crap. I know what I want, and I just want to go buy it. It sounds very childish of me to some extent, but I'm going to be honest, I hate the runaround. Now, let me explain it for a second. Let's look at bulkheads. They sell bulkheads. Let's say their bulkhead is $9. Whoa, that's kind of expensive. I need 200 of them. That gets, we're talking thousands of dollars here already. Okay, so let's say I buy your really expensive American-made prefabricated bulkheads. At least I know everything fits. So you're kind of paying for the convenience that at least it all goes together. Well, I'm not the biggest dumbass in the world. I can figure out thread sizes, so that's not really convenient to me. I'll figure it out if I have to. So what else am I paying for? Well, you know exactly what hole size to cut in your glass. Okay, so go over to their glass hole saw portion of their website. What do you find? Expensive glass saws. And then you start doing the math. You're going to wind up spending $2,000 in bulkheads, hundreds of dollars in hole saws. For what? That is kind of the point where it just kind of got upsetting to me. Everything on their website seems to be upselling and call to ask for pricing for the newest, latest model. I'm just not a fan of that business model, which has pushed me to use other suppliers, and it has been more labor intensive. So my number one supplier is actually Amazon. There may be a lot of pushback for it because a lot of stuff on Amazon is cheap Chinese garbage. However, it does hold water. So look over here, I got my bulkhead. I have put together this specific bulkhead that meets all of my requirements. It costs approximately half as much. I think each one of these, the unit cost came out to just under $5 a pop, and I can use really cheap hole saws for all of them. So instead of spending $2,000 on bulkheads and $500 on hole saws and sharpeners and getting upsold on other garbage, I spent like $800 and got all of it done. I broke 4 20-gallon tanks across doing over 100 20-gallon tanks, 40 different 10-gallon tanks, a bunch of 5s, a 125. All that to say, I didn't have a high failure rate, and my bulkheads are 100% successful. For me, Amazon wound up being a great supplier. You can see why Amazon comes out on top. Very low minimum order quantities. They're shipped to your door the next day whenever you need them, meaning I don't need to buy them today. I can just wait and buy them later, and they'll be there when I need them. The return policy is pretty good on Amazon. It's not as good as Home Depot, but it's pretty good on Amazon. And it's overall convenient for me to source lots of different equipment from them. So my number one supplier was actually Amazon. My number 2 supplier, Home Depot. I love going to Home Depot in general. I can spend way too much money there any day of the week. But the things I bought from them were obviously cinder blocks, 2x4s, all of the paint, but additionally, substrate, trickle tower racks. I use all of their totes for storage and stuff like that. And I think generally, they are a very good place to find the pieces that don't fit. When you buy stuff on Amazon, for example, I bought very nice sump pumps. These are half horsepower sump pumps. They come pre-built with a float valve. Now, they seem like they should hook up to 1-inch pipe very easily. They do not. They are some metric thread that is just a mystery. And so when I went to Home Depot, I brought the part. They helped me very quickly figure out what I need, and it was very nice. So having some in-person store to go to try to figure out weird thread sizes, or how to combine 2 different pipe fittings to get to something, you'll need that. And for me, it's Home Depot. It doesn't matter if it's Lowe's or Menards or wherever you are. For me, it's Home Depot, and they've served me very well. At least my local one has. The next big supplier has been Facebook Marketplace. Tons of stuff here is secondhand, and it's a great place to save money. I don't feel like I need to sell you on Facebook Marketplace at all, but I've saved a ton of money going through Facebook Marketplace and places like OfferUp or Craigslist to find deals on specific equipment that was pretty much brand new out of the box. I just never really used it. The next is Jack Watley Discus. For all of my medicine, I go through Jack Watley Discus if they have it. The guy is very fair, and I need to buy bulk medicine when I brought stuff in so that I can breed without ever having any of these diseases ever again. The best quality for the fish that I'm specifically breeding was actually found overseas. And so, of course, I had to go through the garbage process of importing myself, medicate everything, and assume all of that loss but in doing so, I use Jack Watley discus for medication. Additionally, for my RO supplies, I went through Bulk Reef Supply. I felt like their RO information online was pretty good, and their products match their information online. It just makes it easy. The other big supplier I used was Petco. They sell a 50% off discount on their Imagitarium tanks, and it used to be the old $1 sale back in the day. That was pretty rad. Now it comes out to more like $1.90 a gallon, but whatever, inflation's inflation. It's still a really, really good deal, and I find their Imagitarium tanks are of really good quality. And there's lots of dissenting opinions. Listen, I bought hundreds of them. I've drilled everything down to their 5.5 gallon tanks. I had 100% success drilling 10 of them at random, and I think that speaks volumes. Their glass is the thinnest thing I've ever seen. That is what it is. It's totally functional, and it's great to drill in. So if you're looking for a fish room, I highly consider you buying your new tanks from Petco in their Imagitarium sale. If you are not looking for new tanks, obviously Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, and OfferUp have lots of stuff out there. I find that you'll wind up spending more time cleaning it just to make it usable than you will just buying it brand new. New tanks, when they're 50% off, a 20-gallon tank costs somewhere in the neighborhood of like $38. I think that's pretty reasonable for a 20-gallon tank. When you have a whole fish room, it really does add up, so I understand people that use secondhand tanks. However, that silicone has a lifespan, and to me, I don't always trust that those tanks that are especially stored outside. Now I live in Arizona, so it gets 120 outside. I've seen lots of silicone splitting, lots of really old silicone from, 2010s era Aquarium tanks that may have sat in a garage empty, that came from a garage sale. I just didn't want to play with it, so I went new, but no problem out there for any. I just want to tell you what I use. My last supplier is actually a local wholesaler. I don't want to disclose the name because they are my wholesaler after all, but that is where I supplied all of my sponge filters, and some of my other equipment that I get in here is through just a local aquarium wholesaler. If you're a business, you could reach out to me. I'll tell you who I use, or just find somebody local to you. Especially if you are in a larger city area, finding a local wholesaler that sells aquarium stuff is a gem. To be able to just will call pickup, I can order 100 sponge filters and pick them up tomorrow at wholesale price. That's unbeatable. So creating a relationship with your local wholesaler, especially if you're a business, absolutely worth it. I covered all the variables that I consider. I covered my considerations that I consider, and I explained my suppliers. So that kind of brings us to the end of the video. However, if you are still here, one, you're a certified fish nerd, and I'd love to have you as a subscriber. But two, I'd like to have a quick conversation. You see, all the people that only wanted to learn procurement stuff left about 5 minutes ago. So now that I can have a little bit of a conversation, I wanted to explain why I moved from a hobbyist to a business. I want to do so concisely so I don't waste your time, but this matters a lot to me. I've already gotten some flack for it in the comments, and I get a lot of side eyes when I say I'm a businessman and not a hobbyist. It's an important distinguishing mark here. The reason that I'm a businessman, and I'm in it for profit as a business instead of as a hobbyist, is because my goals have changed. My goal now is no longer just to do stuff like I was in high school and breed and kind of create some fish for my local community. That was cool, and that had a time in my life. I've done a ton of thinking about it. I used to do importing as well. I think importing is wrong. I think it is not the path forward. My hope is that when my kids come of age, if they're into this hobby, which they probably won't be, but say they were, I want them to be able to buy in a different world. I don't want it to be the same 40 years from today. And I'm actually doing something about it. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I'm spending a ton of time doing it. And when you go for a goal that big, to change the supply chain of a multi-billion-dollar industry, to go from overseas sourcing with wholesaler distribution networks, all this capital that's already been spent for all of the systems, if you try to change all of that, you better treat it as a business. And I am. I am treating this absolutely as a scalable, for-profit enterprise. That is the goal. There is no other way for me to tackle the amount of change without giving it that level of respect. And so from here on, I am effectively done apologizing for treating this like a business. It is of utmost respect that I give to my hobby that I love, which you have no idea. I'm getting tingles thinking about it right now. I love this hobby. I have been doing this since I was probably less than 10 years old. I've always been the kid that wants to go fishing just so I can look at the crawdads in the lake. I love it. That is what I grew up on. And those are the people that I want to help in the future. And the only way that I feel like I can do my best in doing that is by changing the way that the supply chain functions. To do so, I need to prove that it is both possible to do it scalably and profitably here in America to breed stuff. So I'm starting with Neocaridina shrimp and guppies. Over time, I'll expand if I'm profitable, and I really hope that we can change the way that the whole industry sources fish. Not just with me. I'd like to be a small, candlelight with a whole momentum of people behind me. I think it's possible. I genuinely think that buying, Cheerios at the grocery store is not the same as buying a shrimp at a local fish store. Right now, they're treated the exact same. In order to drive cost lowest for consumers and produce the most variability to consumers, we produce them with extended supply chains. Those are the only two benefits to extended supply chains: reducing the cost to the consumer and providing a lot of variety. I do not think that that is the most important thing. I think the most important thing to this hobby is going to be just the success of future hobbyists. When somebody buys a $100 setup from Petco and they buy, whatever cheap fish they buy there that are loss leader fish and they die, they assume that they are bad at keeping fish. I don't think that is correct. And it is because I'm trying to change that whole model that I am a business and not a hobby. So I hope that kind of summarizes it up. I know I got kind of serious in there. That was really cool. I'm glad I got to talk to you guys about that. If you have any questions or you want to reach out, please hit up the comment section below or email me. And I appreciate all of your time. If you found value in this, if you have other friends that are into the hobby, send it to them. It would mean the world to me. I appreciate you guys. Keep on keeping on.